Hiya world, it's one of those grey days today when Donald Trump has won a second election and I don't really want to go anywhere near social media or the news anymore. I'm fed up with that. And it's dark outside, whatever, so I've got to have the lights on. So if I look a bit pink, I look a bit pink, so sorry. So I left you last time with a description of how various bits of technology had either enabled or discouraged consumers such as myself from violating copyright. For example, I talked about the rise of the blank cassette, the mini disc, the recordable CD, the digital tape formats like DAT and DCC, and all of those back in the halcyon days of the 80s and 90s were ways in which, yes, we could make increasingly better copies of albums. But the major thing throughout most of that period is that you had to make copies in real time. Let's say I've got a mini disc and I'm making a copy of my last CD that I bought to give to a mate, whatever. I've got to listen to that album whilst I'm making the copy. It will take however long that CD lasts before the copy is ready. And then I just hand it over to my mate and say, yeah, okay, I'll have a look at what you've got in your collection now. Yeah, I fancy that album. That's what we did. That was as basic as life was. Yeah, there were the cowboy outfits. Clacton Market in the 80s was an absolute, I suppose, a bootlegger's paradise, really. It was just full of knockoff stuff that really was not very good, really appalling quality. I can remember buying a couple of Beatles tapes. One of those Beatles tapes was 62 to 66, and all of those songs where the left channel's in one ear and the right channel's in the other ear, as it were, you have one channel completely missing. So you'd have, even if you played it in mono, you would still have half the song missing. So it was that bad. Those kind of people might be using some form of high-speed tape duplication facility that probably wasn't working. But by and large, the people that were infringing copyright were basically making the odd copy here and there to play in the car. Or it might be that they've bought the record and they don't want the record to get damaged, so they keep the record nice, they make one tape copy of it to play on the tape machine, and they would rather play that on the tape machine than risk wearing out or scratching a record. Perfectly normal things that that people did. It was totally harmless, but people, the record companies, as I say, they were throwing their toys out of the pram. They were getting all pernickety about it and everything, so that by the time the 90s came along, those DCC and DAT formats came out, they wanted to put some high-pitched tone on the thing so that if you tried to make a digital copy, it would scramble. People didn't like it because you could actually hear those tones. And I think that partly because of that misplaced paranoia, it allowed in the 21st century technologies to get a hold that went basically underground, like LimeWire and these things like Napster and stuff. You've only got to make one copy of that. This is not, oh god, I'll wait 55 minutes or so for this album to finish and then that's a copy done. It's, oh, I'll drag that file over from there into this folder here, and then that makes that available to everybody. I'll upload the thing onto Napster. I'll upload this onto YouTube. And then suddenly they become available for everybody. And the amount of lawsuits and the amount of prime headlines that these were making in the late 90s and early 2000s was just mind-boggling, and the sums of money that were involved. And then the fact that I suppose companies like Microsoft saw their opportunity to nudge their way in, as did Apple as well, to nudge their way in and say, right, well, look, we can sell these songs online. The next thing that really needs to get solved is this thing called AI. And with that slurp of coffee, I'd like to talk about some of the software that has been used for music making since, I suppose, the 90s, 80s, in fact, really. Early computer music software was basically you took a keyboard like this, you had some DIN style MIDI sockets. This one doesn't have any because it's a more modern thing that uses USB. But you had some DIN style MIDI sockets. You connected that up to your computer, as I do with this one. The sounds are produced by MIDI code. They generate MIDI code themselves. That code is then sent into the computer as a series of noughts and ones, essentially digital binary, 16-bit code. You can have as many tracks as you like, because back in the day, hard disks, in 1996, the average hard disk size was 850 megabytes, not even gigabytes, megabytes. And that's obviously not enough to be able to record vocals or other live instruments. Hard disk recording started to become a thing in the early noughties, but that's only when hard disks themselves had become much larger in capacity. In fact, this MIDI-only way of recording was very relevant to me when I was learning about how to do it, just for my own little projects, because that's essentially what I had. I think I had 1.2 gigabytes on a Pentium 75. I got this piece of software called Cakewalk, later became Sonar. I don't know if they still exist now, but basically it was, you could record really as many MIDI tracks as you like. You could get any number of instruments that use that MIDI standard. So you could mix and match. You could have a MIDI drum machine, a MIDI keyboard, then you could have a little box, such as the Alesis Nano Synth, for example, which just contained all of the jiggery-pokery to produce the voices, but because you'd connect that to a MIDI keyboard anyway, you could use that keyboard to control the sounds coming out of the MIDI box. The whole lot then goes into the computer, switch on Cakewalk. You can allocate each track to a particular instrument on a particular device. Then you can just take the whole lot. Once you're happy with the sound balancing and MIDI and stuff, you can put MIDI effects on there, reverb, delay, chorus, to your heart's content. Send it all out to stereo something, which is what I used to do. I had a little 4-track tape machine, would record the stereo onto 2 tracks, would record the vocals onto 2 tracks, and then take that 4-track thing and copy it to just an ordinary stereo cassette as a master. I recorded tons of stuff over many years just using Cakewalk. I can't use that Cakewalk stuff now. In fact, I haven't been able to use it since 2008. And in fact, any of the hard disks or whatever that have got those original Cakewalk files in them, because they're just not compatible with anything anymore, they're probably in that great big hard drive in the sky, circularly filed. I do have, for I think a lot of the stuff that I produced back in the day, CDs that I made of them, and MP3s and stuff like that I made of them. But essentially, you know, it's computer copied onto cassette. As and when I had the means, I was able to make either mini discs or CDs or something like that. With the advent of software such as Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic for the Apple Mac, the technology has over the time got bigger and better. I haven't met an Apple computer yet that hasn't been able to handle any number of MIDI tracks with multiple effects, not just the basic ones that, you know, were in Cakewalk or whatever, but actual emulations of the kind of gear that people actually use in the music industry, then as many audio tracks, again with the effects on them. So, and I haven't, as I say, I haven't met a Mac yet that hasn't been able to cope with it. But now, Logic, which, let's be realistic, it's £200. It is doing the stuff that back in the day, equipment costing many, many hundreds of thousands of pounds could do, and in some cases now can't do. What I'm going to show you next would have blown anybody's mind even 10 years ago. I mean, it blows my mind now. It's the Apple, you had me at scrolling effect that's had on me. So to cut to the chase of it, during lockdown, round about 2021, something like that, 2020, something like that, they announced the next great Beatles project, which was going to be a Let It Be film on steroids. They developed Demixing Technology so that where sounds had all been recorded together in mono or all onto one track of a tape, for example, they could actually separate those out. We've talked about that in the past. But that was technology that was for the majority of hobbyists at home was just pie in the sky wish. Oh, I wish I could do that kind of thing. Now, Logic costs 200 quid. It's got a very basic, rudimentary version of this demixing technology on it. And I'd like to demonstrate it for you now. So, world. You see here before you just a tiny little snip of a song that I wrote back in about 1998 or something like that. So like 30 years ago nearly. It's really not very good, but it's a song that means something to me. So I'd like to keep it anyway, and I'd like to have perhaps a nicer version of it than the one that I've got. As I say, it's started out life as a few MIDI tracks on a computer that were then copied onto a 4-track tape machine with some vocals then added on, and then that whole lot then copied to a normal tape, and then that tape copied to a mini disc, I think this came from. So it's been through the mill. To be honest, it sounds quite terrible, but there are things we can do about it. And this is where AI is coming in here, because it's going to demix it for us. Okay, so this is what it sounds like now.
Let you enter into my space for a while. Said it's 'cause you're missing me so bad.
Now we're going to put this through an algorithm which is going to endeavour to sort out the particular layers in this song. It's been trained to recognise things that sound like drums, things that sound like bass, things that sound like vocals, and then everything else. And all it's going to take is 2 clicks. So watch, right click on the little track region, choose stem splitter. You don't even have to search down a list for it. It is there. Boom, stem splitter. You can choose which of them that you'd like it to sort it out into. I can't really see any reason why you wouldn't get it to sort it 4 ways. But if you just wanted the drums from it, you could unclick the rest of those here, whatever. But I don't see a need to do that for this. And look, it's just going to split it up. And now, if I solo, this is outside the circle. I've got vocals, drums, bass, and other, all conveniently color-coded. So I could now solo this track. Now we're going to play that whole section again. There are going to be parts of it that are going to be silent, all right? And parts of it that's just going to have my vocals on.
Let you enter into my space for a while. Said it's 'cause you're missing me so bad.
Isn't that incredible? I just find that absolutely incredible. So now I can solo the drums. Here's the bass, such as it is. That didn't sound so good to me. Whether or not that was just my fault in the first place for perhaps overloading something, I don't know. But yeah, maybe I chose a crappy bass instrument there, or perhaps didn't record it so well because that's a bit distorted. And here is the remainder of the instruments. These things at the beginning are actually supposed to be muted guitar sounds. I think I had a very cheap Roland keyboard, certainly not one of their better ones. So as you can see, there's an awful lot of potential here for perhaps doing what the Beatles have done, reviving the old recordings, trying to remix them in a way that reflects the musical tastes of the 2000s or the 2020s, for example. However, I think this is the whole point of artificial intelligence, is that it can go much further beyond that. This algorithm has been programmed to spot things that sound like vocals, generic things that sound like percussion, things that sound like bass, and then everything else. If they'd wanted to make a more fully featured version, which I'm sure they could, but maybe not at the price of the basic Logic Pro, they could have perhaps said, right, well, recognise a piano. This is what a piano sounds like. This is what guitars sound like. And I'm sure that kind of feature will come. But what went on during the demixing of the Beatles projects was, this is what John Lennon's guitar sounds like. This is what George Harrison's guitar sounds like. This is what John Lennon's voice sounds like. This is what Paul McCartney's voice sounds like. And when the artists got together last week and presented a letter to the powers that be, this is what they were complaining about, that this kind of thing could be abused. Imagine replacing my terrible vocal on here with a piece of software that's been trained to recognise, this is what Frida's vocals sound like. This is what Agnetta's vocals sound like. And then I got the two girls of ABBA singing my song. This is the point of AI. It isn't just sampling. Perhaps that warrants a video all on its own about the history of sampling. Sampling is taking an event that has happened and is repurposing it. If I were to do that, replace my vocals with Frida and Agnetta singing the same thing, which the software could do, then clearly that's an event that didn't happen. That's the point about AI. That data is valuable. And at the moment, the tech industry And perhaps I don't know really what, how the record company publishers and things are going with it, but there are people in that business that seem quite happy for musicians to be able to mine data and actually make something that didn't happen and not remunerate the artists concerned. And this can be done. Paul McCartney made a version of a song called New with John Lennon singing the actual, in quotes, singing the middle eight. Quite clearly he didn't. It was him because it was an AI programmed to recognise his voice, programmed with the words. This is how he would have sung them. It is so bizarre. But quite clearly, if people are going to have that kind of use made of their original creative output, they should be paid for it. There should be legislation determining when and if that technology can be used and who has the right to do it. This is a great little tool for me to perhaps sit and revisit some of my old songs. It's also a great little tool for me to do some anomaly spotting, but I think this is going to be the next big headache for the music industry. I will let you go now. I obviously there's just no great conclusion to this because I don't know where it's going to go. If I find out, I'll keep you informed. But that'll do it for today. Remember to like, subscribe, share if you dare, and if you'd like to, if you've enjoyed what's gone on here, send us a little super thanks by clicking the heart down below, and I'll be your best friend forever. Thank you. Bye.